982 complaints were reported to the Information Regulator. This is for breach of the POPI Act during the 2023-2024 financial year. The regulator held a briefing to release outcomes of some of the high-profile investigations. Some include an enforcement notice against the SA Police Service for the distribution of personal information of victims of sexual abuse in that Krugersdorp area. You may remember that case where about 8 women were raped. And some of the newer investigations also include the security compromise notifications from the IEC following an unauthorized release of candidate lists. But let's unpack some of the outcomes. And for that, we are joined by chairperson of the Information Regulator, Advocate Pansy Tlakula. Advocate, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. 982 is a considerable number there. I think let's talk firstly about just when we look at that full number of complaints that you have received, where you are in resolving some of those.
A majority of them have been resolved, actually, because when we receive a complaint, it either goes through pre-investigation, and then we decide whether to take it through to full investigation or settle it through alternative dispute resolutions. So quite a sizable number of those complaints have been resolved.
I know that you looked obviously at complaints around not just the POPI Act, but also PIA, which I thought to be very, very interesting. And if you'll allow us just to talk a little bit about PIA, which is, of course, the Promotion of Access to Information Act, and a distinctive difference between the two, right? PIA, of course, giving effect to the constitutional right to access to information. I think in a year where it's an election year, transparency is a very important thing. And what you've done is you've looked at transparency and their compliance to PIA of various political parties. If you will just share with us some of the findings and concerns that you have around just how transparent political parties are and should be.
Yes, definitely. We took that decision to assess political parties' compliance with PIA, particularly because of the forthcoming elections. Most of the political parties are not compliant with PIA. We are sympathetic to that because it's not long that the PIA was amended to make it applicable to political parties. That happened after the case of My Vote Counts in the Constitutional Court. So political parties are still grappling with compliance with PIA. Some of them have complied, but not fully. Some have manuals that they have compiled, and these manuals talk about the contact details of political parties, their structure, and also information that is available automatically, and also how people can contact political parties if they want disclosure to certain records. So some of them are compliant, but on the whole, none of them are 100% compliant.
I mean, the numbers are quite startling. You found, and I'm reading now from your own findings, we find that 54% of political parties represented in Parliament are generally non-compliant with PIA. About 46 of political parties represented have some level of compliance. Therefore, none of the political parties represented in Parliament are compliant with PIA. How much of this has to do with their disclosure, perhaps, of their funding?
You see, the disclosure part of the funding that they received, which is above the 100,000 threshold, that, as a matter of course, they have to disclose automatically to the IEC. So as far as that is concerned, that's not a problem at all, because they have legal obligation in terms of the applicable legislation to disclose that information to the IEC. It's just other information that they have not complied with, information that they have to disclose in terms of the manuals that they have to compile.
Yeah, quite a bit of work that you've done. You've assessed the PIA compliance of 27 national government departments with the exclusion of state security?
Yes, because state security has been exempted from compiling a PIA manual by the Minister of Justice through proclamation of a gazette. Yeah,
and the finding there, only 6 provincial departments' manuals comply with PIA. That's Very, very concerning. That is it in your view also, perhaps when you start to enter some of these government institutions, a skills shortage perhaps that gets in the way of compliance, particularly for government departments?
I don't think as far as PAIA is concerned, the skills is a problem. I think it's just record management, which is a problem. The problem with compliance comes to POPIA because POPIA is a new piece of legislation and it is quite complex to implement. You must remember that PAIA was passed in 2002, so it has been around. The only difference is that it was administered then by the South African Human Rights Commission, and the South African Human Rights Commission at that time did not have enforcement powers. So when PAIA was transferred to the Information Regulator, it was transferred with enforcement powers because the Act was amended to that effect.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that we have this opportunity to learn the difference between PAIA and POPI Act. And I think it's important for South Africans to be aware of that. PAIA, of course, speaking to access to information, the constitutional right to have access to information, while the POPI Act really speaks to the constitutional right to privacy. And your findings there, very, very concerning. I mean, we remember as a country being shocked by the Krugersdorp rapes of 8 women at that mine dump. And, you know, we were shocked by it. And then to add salt to the wound, you found that the SAPS acted against the POPI Act in disclosing the information of some of the victims. I mean, just talk to us a little bit about just how far that went and how we go about resolving an issue like that, where it's not just the infringement of people's rights, but it might very well put their lives in danger.
Definitely. You remember that we made a finding against the SAPS in that regard, and we issued them with an enforcement notice requiring them to take certain steps to ensure that that does not happen again. We also requested them to discipline the officials who were responsible for leaking that information or distributing it, and to ensure that in future these things don't happen. And they complied 100%, by the way, with our findings and our directives. But lo and behold, as I'm talking to you now, we have a complaint against the SAPS on a similar matter involving 2 victims of a crime, and their information was leaked on WhatsApp. So that the question that we ask ourselves is, was the SAPS serious in implementing our findings? Because we said to them, make sure that this does not happen again. But it has happened in less than a year.
Are you at all concerned that as the Information Regulator, you perhaps run the risk of being like the Auditor General, for instance, particularly how it was seen a few years ago before it was given some teeth, that you are able to then go in and say to the SAPS, don't do this again, but not a lot of strength to enforce any sort of action for accountability or justice?
No. Our powers are enforceable. No private body or public body can ignore our findings. You know that as far as POPIA is concerned, we issue an enforcement notice and we direct that certain action must be taken within a specific period. If that action is not taken within the specified period, then we can issue an infringement notice in terms of which we can fine the responsible party up to 10 million rands, or alternatively, we can, if they want to go the prosecutorial route, we can then ask the NPA to investigate and prosecute, and the sentence there is up to 10 years. So the findings of the Information Regulator cannot be ignored.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that, because I think it certainly restores the confidence of many South Africans. I know that there was an issue and complaint raised around the TransUnion in March 2022, and we can get into that perhaps on another day because we are out of time. But a great opportunity and a reminder for our viewers that there is this sometimes a seemingly complex legislation that is there to protect your privacy and your information. Advocate Pansy Tlakula, always a pleasure, and thank you so much for speaking to us.